Hello guys, welcome to my channel Movie Tales. Hello. At the start of the movie, we are introduced to a young man named Bong. Bong is extremely talented at cooking and is the youngest chef in Blue House, which is the official residence of the South Korean Prime Minister. That evening, Bong learns that the house is throwing a dinner party for a Chinese ambassador. The ambassador is extremely sensitive to fish bone, so Bong is instructed to prepare a delicious fish dish with no bones. Bong heeds their instruction and immediately starts preparing the dish. At nightfall, the dinner is ready and served to the ambassador. Sadly, as soon as the envoy bites the fish, he finds a hook in it. This puts Bong in a serious dilemma as several guards search the mansion to find him. In the following scene, a pair of police officers investigating the incident arrived at Bong's apartment and knocked on his door. Bong knows that he's in trouble, so he tries to escape through the balcony, while the officers try their best to catch him. In the process, Bong, unfortunately, plunges into a swimming pool below, smacking his head on the bottom of the pool. For some reason, he keeps falling as a woman swims toward him, and plants a kiss on his lips. When Bong wakes up, he finds himself on a strange bed and an even stranger room. Bong feels something is wrong and immediately rushes to a nearby mirror. His reflection surprises him as Bong discovers that he has become a woman. He contemplates for a second but finalizes that he must be dreaming due to the fall. Bong creeps out of the room to figure out what's going on, but finds dozens of women outside, who bow and refer to her as Your Highness. Surprised by this, Bong runs outside the building but suddenly feels cold in her crotch. This is when Bong realizes that she has lost her banana. Bong is horrified by this and initially believes that he's been trafficked into a sex change operation. However, when she observes his surroundings, Bong discovers that he time-traveled to the past. The realization causes him to go into shock and he's eventually brought back to the palace. The next day, Bong wakes up and learns her current identity from a maid. It turns out that she time-traveled to the Joseon dynasty, of very early times. Moreover, she now lives inside the body of Kim So-yong, a royal ward. To make matters worse, Bong discovers that Kim is scheduled to marry the king and become queen in a few days. The maid also explains that her body was found floating on the lake after an unknown accident occurred. Luckily, the guards found and brought her back to the palace. Hearing this, Bong theorizes that both his and Kim's spirits must have switched, and infers that the ticket back home is the lake. Bong asks the maid to lead him to the lake as he plans to jump in and return to the present. Sadly, her plan to jump takes an unexpected turn, as she lands on muddy ground. It turns out that the Grand Queen ordered the palace servants to drain the lake overnight to prevent anyone from falling into the water again. Bong is disheartened by the news but still reckons that water is the answer. So, she desperately tries to submerge herself in any water source she can find. She even goes as far as inserting her head in a pail of water that is used to clean the floors. However, all her efforts prove abortive. A few days later, the wedding day arrives. Bong is unaware of the dynasty's customs but with the help of her handmaids manages to complete the required wedding rites. That night, Bong, who is now queen, is invited to the king's chambers to sleep with him. Bong is horrified by the thought and offers the king some alcohol in hopes of him passing out. Fortunately, the king sleeps off, much to Bong's relief. The following day, Bong wakes up with a hangover and is offered some food. However, she is disgusted by the soggy meal and passes a message to the royal chef to cook ramen instead. The chef is confused by the term but tries to make the foreign meal based on Bong's instructions. The chef tries to make the dish multiple times, but Bong is dissatisfied with every attempt. The first dish is too healthy, while the subsequent dishes are too bland and spicy. Eventually, the chef becomes upset and gives up, asking Bong to cook it herself. Bong, remembering her culinary techniques, decides to prepare the dish. Bong enters the royal kitchen and immediately picks up a knife. Her maid worries because the queen has never attempted to cook since childhood. Hence, the maid, alongside the other servants, expects her to make a mess of the kitchen. However, much to the servants' surprise, Bong starts cutting the vegetables with great speed and precision. She cuts everything perfectly and in the right size, ultimately, cooking a perfect dish. Bong takes the ramen back to her chambers and enjoys the meal with her right-hand maid. Back in the kitchen, the chef is envious of Bong's cooking abilities and proposes that the food simply looks good but doesn't taste nice. To test his theory, the royal chef tries the leftovers remaining in the pot. However, as soon as he has a bite, he is amazed by how good it is that the even drops his spoon in shock. After the eventful encounter, Bong suddenly comes up with an idea. The new queen realizes that she can easily win over the royal family with her culinary skills. The Grand Queen drained the lake. So, if Bong can please her with some food, she might agree to refill the lake. Bong instantly returns to the kitchen, but the jealous royal chef asserts his authority and refuses to let her inspect the food prepared for the Grand Queen. Bong is pissed by this and challenges him to a speed cooking contest. The royal chef initially backs out from the fight but accepts the challenge after Bong teases him. A servant rings a bell and the contest begins. The head chef takes his knife and viciously cuts a bunch of carrots. However, the queen's hands are faster and quickly cut some cucumbers with ease. After several minutes of cooking, Bong's dish is ready and she is the first to ring the bell, thus winning the contest. The royal chef is pissed at this and argues that though speed is important, taste is the ultimate test of a chef's skill. Bong confidently agrees and requests the royal cuisine inspector to taste both dishes to see which is better. The inspector is fascinated by Bong's cuisine and declares it the better dish, prompting her to take charge of the royal kitchen. Bong uses her newly acquired status to her advantage as she analyzes the Grand Queen's meals. Bong discovers from her food choices that the Grand Queen is a picky eater due to her recent development of toothache. Thus, Bong decides to make a meal with a soft texture for the aristocrat. Bong gets to work right away and begins making a potato porridge. First, she pours some milk into the pot and adds the right ingredients, as she occasionally tastes the mixture. Then, the potatoes are eventually added to the pot. After which, the dinner is served with some flour toppings for a cohesive presentation. Bong is pleased with the final product and delivers it to the Grand Queen herself. The Queen greatly enjoys the meal but highlights that the dish is not perfect, as it arrived cold. The temperature change caused the perfectly mashed potatoes to lump, hence, slightly altering the taste. Also, the porridge spilled on the sides of the plate which also affected the presentation. Bong is distraught to hear this and sadly begins her trip back to the palace. While in her carriage, Bong brainstorms on an alternative means of delivering food to the Grand Queen. Shortly after, she comes up with a stellar idea. Bong sews a cloth, and has her maid deliver the fabric alongside some instructions to the royal engineers. With Bong's directions, the engineers construct a special food delivery carriage that is properly insulated on all sides by the cloth. Meanwhile, Bong prepares an array of tasty meals and has the servants deliver the newly designed cabinet. The Grand Queen receives the hot meal, and enjoys it, leaving no leftovers. Eventually, the engineers return to Bong and deliver the good news as the invention is proved to be a success. A few days later, the king organizes a huge banquet and invites delegates from all over the country. Unfortunately, the cooks get sick on the banquet day and the royal kitchen is short-staffed. Bong notices this and decides to help out. She sneaks out of the banquet and enters the kitchen. Bong discovers that the pantry is low on ingredients, as the groceries meant to be delivered that day couldn't make it. With limited resources, Bong has no choice but to get creative. The queen, alongside her handmaids, prepares a simple but unique dish of potatoes. Bong peels and wraps the potato around a stick and deep fries it, making it crisp and crunchy. The guests are initially unhappy when they see the first dish, as they expect something classier for a royal banquet. However, as soon as they try the unique meal, their eyes shine in approval as they marvel at its taste. Bong's second dish is a bit more tasking as there's no meat in the kitchen. She creatively uses beans to make a veggie burger with tomato relish on the side. Bong is pleased with her invention and names it McDonald, inspired by the modern McDonald itself. The dish, just like the potato serving, is a smash hit as the guests savor the mouth-watering cuisine. For the final meal, Bong creates a classic jelly dessert with a twist. She writes special messages on the jelly sticks and calls them fortune jelly, as you get to read your fortune after you're done with the dessert. The guests enjoy the classic jelly and have fun reading their respective fortunes. Despite the initial hiccups, the banquet is a smash hit, thanks to Bong's cooking. The Grand Queen, who also attended the banquet, is impressed by Bong's skills and finally asks her to make a request. Without any hesitation, Bong asks to have the lake refilled. The Grand Queen grants her request and commands the servants to start working on the job. Sadly, as it is the early century, there are no advanced machines to aid this task. Hence, the servants transported water manually with wooden buckets. The process is unbelievably slow as the servants make a long trip from the town's well to the lake. Bong is annoyed by this and swiftly comes up with a new method. She asks each servant to stay at one spot and simply pass the bucket from one person to the other. The people are pleased with the system as it makes the job easier and faster. They all continue the task and work on it patiently while Bong oversees the lengthy process. Several days pass, but the lake is yet to fill. Bong soon gets tired of waiting and becomes desperate. Luckily, a heavy downfall begins which slowly but gradually waters the lake. Bong is overjoyed by the weather change and dances ecstatically under the rain. A few hours later, the lake is filled and Bong heads to the shores and signs her name on a cornerstone. After which, she jumps into the lake and sinks underwater, just like she did at the start of the movie. When Bong wakes up, he is astonished to find himself in a hospital and sees an officer sleeping a few meters away from his bed. He quietly tries to slip out but the officer wakes up and a swift chase ensues. Bong manages to get away from him but two more officers show up and corner him. Desperate, Bong jumps down from a high platform, escaping the men as he races down the street. He immediately heads to a public library and searches for a history book. There, he finds a publication about the Joseon dynasty and smiles, knowing that he has now become a part of history. However, his nostalgic trip down memory lane is swiftly interrupted when the chasing officers arrive at the library. Bong tries to escape again but the officers explain that they aren't there to arrest him. It turns out that the present has been changed due to his time travel to the Joseon era. Now, he is not being chased by the police. Instead, they are there to protect him as Bong is now a whistleblower and has exposed a high-ranking official for corruption. Bong rushes to a nearby computer and searches the web to confirm their claims. Soon after, he discovers that they are telling the truth as history and the present world have indeed changed. The movie ends with Bong standing on a street as he relays a positive message on how a small change in the past can greatly affect the future.